Hello and welcome. I'm Rawia Alami and this is the Dailies, where we take a look at important news stories, reports, analysis and articles published in newspapers and media outlets across the world. Newspapers still reported today on the aftermath of the Israel-Iran war, with a special focus on the results of the American strikes on Iranian nuclear sites. Other news continue to receive some attention from media outlets, especially in America, like Zohran Mamdani's victory in the New York City mayoral primary elections, as journalists took to analyzing this victory and its causes. Finally, a lot of newspapers published pictures and details of the high-profile wedding of Jeff Bezos and Sanchez as the three-day celebrations start in Venice. Let's start with the Washington Post, which reported today on the state of division with which American lawmakers emerged after the briefing by 4 Trump administration officials focused on the details of the American strikes in Iran rather than the scope of the damage they caused. On Thursday, top Trump administration officials told lawmakers the strikes had severely damaged Iran's nuclear program. But senators left the meeting sharply divided. Republicans like Lindsey Graham and Tom Cotton praised the operation as a major success, while Democrats, including Chris Murphy and Chuck Schumer, said the intelligence only showed Iran's program was set back by a few months and not even a few years. The report also points out that the White House is now limiting classified intelligence sharing with Congress after a leaked report contradicted Trump's claims. It concludes that the debate over the effectiveness of the strikes and the president's war powers continues. The Wall Street Journal published an exclusive report spotlighting General Kaine's rapid rise in influence after the U.S. strikes on Iran's nuclear sites. As the new chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Kaine impressed President Trump with his directness and detailed planning for the operation, quickly becoming one of Trump's closest military advisors. Of course, during the mission, Kaine was at Trump's side in the Situation Room, explaining the action in real time and assuring the U.S. president that the pilots were actually protected. The article points out that Kaine's measured style contrasts with some of Trump's previous advisors, and that he's careful not to, in fact, avoid appearing political. The report concludes that while Kaine is now key figure in the White House, he faces the challenge of maintaining his independence while serving a president who values loyalty above all. Israel Hayom published an exclusive report revealing the tough new U.S. and Israeli demands as nuclear talks with Iran are set to resume next week. The U.S. insists Iran must surrender all enriched uranium, halt any future uranium enrichment on its soil, and limit missile production if it wants a deal. Iran, if it refuses, or officials warn indeed, if Iran refuses, another military strike is possible. The report points out that not all of Iran's uranium was destroyed in recent attacks, and also intelligence agencies are closely monitoring Iran's remaining stockpile to prevent it from developing a bomb. Israel's Atomic Energy Commission says the strikes and the killing of key scientists have set back Iran's nuclear program by years. But the article notes that Iran has so far refused to give up its right to enrich uranium. To the New York Times, which published a report highlighting the deadly risks faced by Palestinians in Gaza as they try to access food at new aid distribution hubs set up with Israeli backing. The reports say that over the past month, hundreds have been killed and thousands injured near these sites, where violence frequently erupts as desperate crowds gather for food. The UN and humanitarian groups call the hubs death traps, with children among the victims in more than half of fatal incidents. Also, the families are forced to choose between starvation and risking their lives to collect aid. Israel defends the system as necessary to prevent Hamas from taking control of supplies, but aid organizations say the approach fails to meet the scale of need and leaves Gaza on the brink of famine. The Financial Times also reported on the famine in Gaza, spotlighting Israel's latest decision to hold food aid deliveries to northern Gaza, claiming or citing claims without evidence that Hamas is hijacking supplies. This move comes despite severe famine risks and international warnings about the humanitarian crisis. Gaza clan leaders strongly deny Hamas is dealing aid, explaining they organized large numbers of men to escort and protect aid convoys, ensuring supplies reached those in need. The report points out that a small amount of aid is still reaching southern Gaza, distributed by a private Israeli-backed group, and hundreds of Palestinians have been killed by Israeli forces while trying to access these sites. Now, the report concludes that the UN's warning that most families in Gaza are surviving on just one poor meal a day, with adults often skipping meals to feed children and the elderly. The Times published an in-depth report highlighting how Britain now spends more on disability benefits than on defence or schools, a trend that started in the 1970s and has grown out of control. It points out that 1,000 new people claim disability payments every day with mental health issues like anxiety and depression. Now the biggest reasons for claims. The report also includes multiple charts depicting the rise in disability claims and public expenditure on such claims as opposed to on other important sectors. If we have a look at one of the charts, as you can see here, this is the total disability related benefits. You can see how the graph moves up, and this is the trajectory of the spending on such benefits. It started in the 70s, as you can see, and now moving up. It's the level now in 2025 is about 40 billion, and it is predicted and expected to keep rising for the next 5 years. Now, the report points out that today Britain spends more on all sickness benefits than on defence or even schools, and that even Sir Keir Starmer's backbench critics largely agree that something has gone very, very wrong with Britain's sickness benefits system. Another chart shows the expenditure on disability benefits against other departments' expenditure, and it seems quite shocking, as you can see. So this is the line for the health and social care and the benefits we're talking about. Look how they fly above all other expenditures in so many other sectors, including education, disability, benefit, defense, transport as well. Our levels are about here. This is the 2025-2026 expenditure, but it is expected to continue the same, if not rise a bit, as you can see in all sectors. Now, the report notes also that an aging population and post-pandemic health problems have driven costs up, while reforms to reduce spending risk hurting older people and those with chronic pain. Former Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt wants the system or warns that the system is not designed to cope with the rise in mental health claims and calls for more NHS treatment instead of benefits. The piece concludes that Britain is finally debating how to balance support for the vulnerable with what the country can actually afford. The Guardian reported today on a new deal between the US and China to speed up shipments of rare earth minerals, which are vital for high-tech industries like e-cars, airplanes, and also defense. The agreement finalized this week means China will once again supply these critical minerals to American companies, and in return, the US will remove some of its trade countermeasures. The deal follows months of trade tensions after China restricted rare earth exports in response to US tariffs, causing major supply chain distributions. The report points out that while the agreement brings relief to US manufacturers, it highlights America's ongoing dependence on China for these essential resources. The article concludes that the deal is a step forward, but a lasting solution will require the US to build alternative supply chains. Let's go back to the Wall Street Journal as its editorial contends that Zohran Mamdani's victory in the New York City mayoral primary elections was partly the result of Democratic establishment failures under leaders like Andrew Cuomo. It notes that years of high rents, rising taxes, crime, and a punishing cost of living in New York are all problems common in many big Democratic-run cities. And all of that drove voters to seek new solutions. Cuomo's policies, including rent laws and tax hikes, led to higher prices and also to a shrinking population, while crime and homelessness rose. The editorial emphasizes that Mamdani's leftist promises like rent freezes and government-run supermarkets appeal to frustrated voters who no longer trusted the old guard. It concludes that while Mamdani's idea may not work, voters felt they had no better choice than to take a chance on change. And we'll end on a much lighter note with this Telegraph report that spotlights the high-profile wedding of Jeff Bezos and Sanchez in Venice, which is set to take over the city for 3 days of lavish celebrations. Of course, around 200 guests, including Oprah Winfrey, Leonardo DiCaprio, and also Ivanka Trump and the Kardashian family have arrived in style, with paparazzi capturing every moment, as you can see in those pictures. Of course, as expected, the event is marked by bold fashion choices. And despite protests and claims of hotel shortages, Venice is indeed welcoming the festivities, which are expected to cost tens of millions of dollars. Now, the report also concludes that Bezos and Sanchez's wedding is the must-watch event of the week, drawing global attention and setting also the bar for celebrity nuptials. That's it for today. Thanks for watching.